thoughts. Obviously, this has been a very challenging time for our country, for the world, and for our community. As we watch protests emerge around the world, our community must really stand together in solidarity in all forms, against all forms of injustice and ending of discrimination. We are a community that's built stronger because of diversity. I stand together in the cause to bring an end to acts of violence in our community and communities of color around the world. But we have to do that together. I know there's a lot of events that happened over the last 24 hours that were concerning. We can find a way to protect our businesses and who have worked hard to maintain their establishments and maintain their safety, but we have to find a way to do that is not in a racially charged way. Lastly, I want to say we must not forget why people are protesting. It's okay to voice our concerns in a variety of ways, but we must remember the reason why people are protesting, and that's because a Black man was killed and lost his life recently, and there's been thousands of others who have gone through the same situation. So we are protesting for that particular reason. We know that looting is another thing that is a byproduct of protesting. But as we condone looting, we must also remember why people are protesting and try our best to understand that root evil that exists and do whatever we can as a committee, as a board, as a community to stand together against all acts of injustice and discrimination. So I've said my piece. My committee members, please take a moment to introduce yourself. We know who's on the call, followed by our other board members and elected officials. Committee members, please introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Danielle Judge too. I'm the assistant chair.
Next.
I'm Graham Serralo. I'm the public member.
Okay, board members, you want to just...
Hi, I'm Gabriela Estrella. I'm a member of the committee as well.
Thank you. General board members?
Hi, I'm Liz Ritter. I'm the chair of the Parks and Cultural Affairs Committee.
Thank you, Liz.
Hi, I'm Tanya Bonner, and I'm an assistant chair of Business Development Committee.
Thank you.
Hi, oh, sorry.
After you.
No, you go first. I insist.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Nobles Crawford. I'm on the Parks and Cultural Affairs Committee and also Business Development Committee.
And I am Sally Fisher, and I'm on Health and Environment and Parks and Cultural Affairs.
All righty, thank you all. We have a few elected officials online. You want to go ahead and introduce yourself, please? Starting with, yes.
I'm Robert Jackson. I'm the New York State Senator for the area.
Thank you for joining us, Senator Jackson.
Thank you.
Are there any other representatives from elected officials' offices?
Hello, this is Natalie, in the office of Manhattan Borough President Dale Brewer. Thank you for being here.
For joining us.
Hi, this is Wendy, Assembly Member Al Taylor's office.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. This is Jocelyn from the Manhattan District Attorney's Office.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. This is Philip Ellison, the Manhattan Borough Advocate for the New York City Public Advocate, Jamani Williams. I also bridge around thinking about technology, data and development, just bridging community engagement of those two together.
Okay. And I see Orlando from Carmen de la Rosa's office is here. Orlando, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Hello, everybody. I'm Orlando. Can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you.
Yes. Hi. I'm Orlando Valles. I'm Chief of Staff for Assemblywoman Carmen de la Rosa. She should be joining shortly. She was in a previous call, and she should be on within minutes.
Okay, great. And I believe we have two representatives from the precincts, 33rd and the 34th. Could you please introduce yourself?
Captain Charlie Bello, Commanding Officer of the 33rd Precinct.
Sol June, Commander, 34th Precinct.
All right. Well, thank you all once again for joining us. It is a very challenging time, as we know, around our city, our country, and around the world. And we can to tackle the complex issues of systemic inequalities around this country. I'm hoping tonight that we can dive into some of those issues, hear concerns from community members about things that have conspired in our community as well as around the city. And hopefully the goal is to have some action steps and some next steps we can take as a community with our local leaders and as a committee to take to our full board and also to share our concerns with larger audience. This meeting is being recorded, so I'm hoping that we have viewers joining in to pose questions in the chat box. So without further ado, we usually run our meetings by starting with the updates from the local precinct. So I'm going to turn it over to Captain Bello to give us an update from the 33rd.
Good afternoon, Captain Bello again. So far, we haven't really had any other issues that other boroughs and other precincts have been having regarding the looting. We have made several apprehensions regarding burglaries, which we've been spiking all year in regards. A couple of nights ago, there was a pharmacy that was burglarized. We were able to make an apprehension, and there was a firearm that was recovered. They're targeting establishments like T-Mobile spots or pharmacies. For the most part, anything that they could try to get their hands on. We do have information that there is something that is supposed to unfold tonight in the confines of the 3-4, specifically Dykeman. So I've reached out to the commanding officer of the 3-4. We're coordinating a plan, hopefully to quash whatever beef or problem there are between individuals. But as of now, like I said, all the problems that Manhattan South, Brooklyn, Queens have been having, we really haven't been experiencing in Manhattan North.
Thank you. Okay, we'll go to the 34th first, and then next, and then we'll pose questions to the captains. Lieutenant Jones?
Like the captain stated, recently we've been focusing on the latest developments. We do have enough manpower, and we covered Dykeman and Amsterdam Avenue. I'm not sure if you guys are aware of it. Behind the school, it's been an issue that also we've tackled. So we have a car there at all times, especially the 3rd platoon. And as crime is concerned, we did take 2 shootings, one on May 16th and another one on June 1st. And as far as our overall crimes, we've been down for the year, and the last 28 days, we've been on 29%. The only issue I could say is that we have the great costly autos that went up, and burglaries. So for the burglaries, I have the Senator Boyd mainly affected. So I give the guys the locations where we have the burglary. And what they do is that they will build it, that's residents, and see if we could diminish the crimes there. As far as anything else, we just been focusing on the what's going on in the country right now.
Okay. Well, thank you both for giving the update from your precincts. I do think that there are a lot of concerns. I have concerns, particularly the events that unfolded on Dykeman yesterday evening. From my perspective, it seems as if there were groups who were deputized by the local precincts to sort of take matters into their own hands. And I thought
that I can explain.
Can you speak up?
Can you speak up, please?
Hello?
Yes.
Yes, I'm speaking as loud as I can.
Okay.
You can't hear me?
Not very well.
I guess that's the loudest I can get. Basically, the groups we're referring to, they were actually in different corners within the precinct, especially the areas where you have businesses. They offered the help to protect the businesses. So most of them, they have some kind of linkage to the businesses, and we take the offer. And I believe the mayor did ask for the residents, we did take their own.
Please mute themselves.
Sorry, can everyone else mute themselves? So you're saying that the mayor asked the community to police themselves?
Based on what I'm pretty sure the residents they heard via the media that the mayor was asking for residents to help out. So I guess they take it upon themselves to help out. As far as they were not taking the law into their hand, all they were doing is protecting the neighborhood. So if they saw something, they would alert us and we will respond quickly.
Yeah, I think that obviously it's not the responsibility for the local, for people to police the communities. And it obviously, we saw from the media covers that the issue escalated and it became a racially tense situation between African American community members as well as those who live in the area from Dykeman, Dominicans. And I thought that was instigated by the police force by allowing people to police themselves. And I know that everyone's under pressure and there may be resource issues, but it seemed to me to be highly inappropriate. And it was a situation that escalated that did not need to happen. And I think that the situation, is from what I saw in the video footage was authorized by the NYPD. The video showed there was the commanding officer there giving them directions on how to differentiate themselves from others who may be out after curfew.
No, right. It's Captain Bello 3-3 again. So some of the things that we've been experiencing in the 3-3 is that property owners or business owners are actually safeguarding their own property. So, they're at their business establishment. They're basically in front. If they do see something that is suspicious, they'll call 911 and we respond. That tends to get a faster response as opposed to if they're not in their property, waiting for either a 1011 alarm to show up and then police presence responding. So I guess this might be some of the issues of the 3-4 we're experiencing, because that's something that we're seeing in the 3-3. I mean, to be honest with you, I welcome it, not the violence per se, but them keeping an eye on their establishment. If they do see something, the instructions I'm providing is call 911 right away and then we'll show up, as opposed to them not being there. Next thing in the morning, their place got burglarized.
Yeah, and I think I'll stop after this final statement. I don't think we are in opposition to business owners protecting their business. They've worked hard to protect those businesses. But the problem is when there are groups of people deliberately going after people walking on the street and they're not associated with businesses. I think that is the difference that I saw. So I think that is something we have to be cognizant of. We can continue to encourage people to protect their property. We should do that. We should encourage people as community leaders to call the precincts and call 911 when there are issues. But we have to walk. It's a very thin line between deputizing folks from the community to do the job that we feel should be done by the NYPD. That's my only concern. Are there any concerns by the committee members who'd like to speak on this particular issue before we turn it over to our elected officials?
Danielle, I'm not familiar with the event that you're referring to, Curtis, but I will say that I participated in the event yesterday. For my was initiated by Uplift NYC, which has been doing a lot of positive work in the Uptown community, and the goal was to just provide additional support for businesses and to try to protect the neighborhood. And so I hear what you're saying, but I do think that it was sort of a positive. There was the goal of just providing additional support to businesses, but I'm not familiar with that video, and I'm not familiar with what happened. It sounds very unfortunate and something that shouldn't be condoned. But yeah, I just wanted to sort of say that. And then I guess I'm just wondering if the 3-3 and 3-4 could be, or I guess mostly the 3-4, because I live in Inwood, so I'm familiar with the fact that pharmacies, and apparently there's been a string of pharmacies that have been broken into. I was just wondering if you could speak to that, just what's being done there.
You saying pharmacies been broken into recently?
Yeah, I know the pharmacy, Royal Pharmacy on 213 and Broadway was broken into, and the pharmacist made me aware that a bunch of other pharmacies in the neighborhood had also been broken into. So I just wondered if what's being done to address that specifically. Just businesses that are in the neighborhood, not just on Dykeman. Because I saw a strong presence on Dykeman today. I just wonder how. You mentioned that folks should report it to PD. Should they just call 311? I mean, sorry, 911, or are you providing a direct line to your precinct, or what? Yeah. So if you could just speak to those two things.
No, nothing really changed. If somebody sees something, they still call 911.
Okay.
I mean, like beginning of the conversation, I did say there was uptick in burglaries. I believe that we had the same issue the last time we spoke. So this is like something we've been combating. I don't think it has to do with anything that's been going on lately. So this has been an ongoing issue.
Alrighty.
Thank you so much.
Are there any other questions from our committee members before we move on to our elected officials?
I mean, I think that this is not pressing, but I just wondered about any updates on drag racing, protecting bicyclists, just like other issues.
Yeah, since the pandemic, Charlie Bello again, 3-3, we really haven't had a spike or any issues when it comes to bicyclists or roving bands. Since the new curfew was implemented, to be honest with you, I think it's very effective and it's been very helpful for us to be able to combat and differentiate those that are protesting, I guess, legally, and those that are there solely for looting. So as far as bicyclists and the 3-3, we really haven't had any problems since the pandemic started, obviously, because people are self-quarantining and because the curfew has taken effect.
Okay.
As far as the 3-4 is concerned, I mean, anyone who lives in the community, they can tell that we've had issues with a lot of double park cars. But since the pandemic started, it's been lessened. However, we've been instructing the officers who are on the beat to take a proactive role in telling guys not to double park. In some cases, they actually park in the street. So I guess by doing that, that will alleviate the bicyclists having less issues to go around. We don't really have a lot of lanes. I mean, I've seen more lanes since I've been here, but the ones that we have, we're trying our best to protect them.
Okay. All right. At this time, we'll take a few questions from our community members, if there are any questions for the office.
I have one.
Okay. So Danielle, is there an order we have for questions?
I'm so sorry. First platform, so I'm not quite sure how to.
All right. If you have a question, please acknowledge yourself. So we'll start with Sally. If you have a question, Sally, please.
I guess I find the 34th report very shocking, given what has been going on there on our community. There's, especially on the east side of Broadway, there's a lot of all-night partying going on outside. And I know the area wasn't under curfew, but these are things that, social distancing wasn't being observed. People were being kept up all night. So there are a lot of complaints, and there's a lot of complaints about the drag racing. And then in particular, I wanted to know, given that there was a big heads up, because there was stuff all over social media yesterday, exacerbating the situation at Dykeman, I wonder how you prepare for something like that. When you say, business owner can call me, shouldn't you be there? And what's the plan for tonight?
For the people who are hanging out, I don't know if you've noticed, we put a vehicle, a police car at these locations from 2000 hours all the way to the end of tour, which is approximately 23-30 hours. So we have two problematic locations. We have the Dykeman location from station all the way to the old La Marina. And we also have issues with Amsterdam from 190, from
Right.
189 all the way to Fort George. So if you've noticed, we have a car there at all times, and they keep going back and forth and make sure these areas stay clear. So we have not had issues in these areas, I think, for the past 2 weeks.
Okay, can you explain to me what the presence of a car does to stop things? I mean, what I hear from the residents is the car is there, you might have your sirens on, then they just turn the music louder. So, I mean, our community is thinking that you're not really solving the problem. You might be present.
Concerning the budget, I know,
Just a procedural follow-up. So are you gonna do a resolution from the committee that calls on our electeds to, fully repeal 50A? Because if so, we would need to sort of have just a quick agreement on what the provisions would be and vote on it so that it can go to the full board for passage later this month.
most certainly, I would like to see if we can move with the conversation on the funding, because perhaps there is a way to do a larger resolution that tackles several of the issues that we discussed tonight, or we can figure out a way to just do two resolutions, one on funding. So I would like to just open the floor up to comments on the NYPD funding issue, and if we felt as a committee that it was appropriate to somehow do a resolution tackling all those issues. I see Liz.
Curtis.
Yes. No. Yes.
It's great.
I think Graham wanted to jump in. Graham, was that you?
Yeah.
You can go for it. I'll go after you.
Okay. Yeah. I wanted to say that I'm personally in support of a full repeal of 50A and writing a resolution on that. With the issue of defunding, I'm not 100% on board with that. Part of it is because I don't fully, I read some of the articles, and it feels like it's a kind of a blunt tool to use. So, I'd like to learn more about it. And, but at this time, I just don't know. But I'm interested to hear what other people say.
I think the word defund is misleading. I think what as Council Member Mark Levine mentioned, is that it really is reallocating some of the funding. There's been inequality in our proposed budget cuts. The city obviously is experiencing huge deficits. So we've seen programs like education, for example. There's been $237 million to be cut from education programs, but only $24 million from NYPD budget. So we're looking at the budget, looking at this defunding issue as how do you budgetary equity for the most part? How do you consider maybe, keeping things like the street graffiti teams that we desperately need now? Now that, we didn't talk about that yet, but the graffiti team under NYC Department of Economic Development, that's completely cut. That was a $2.5 million line item that, as we see now, as a byproduct of protest, there is a lot of graffiti happening all over the city. And there's no city funding to support businesses who may need to clean up their buildings. So how do we look at the NYPD budget and reallocate some of that funding to support some of the graffiti efforts for businesses, support education program? We advocated for domestic violence last month. So it's more so not defunding, but really allocating towards programs that's going to make the community stronger. So I will start. I see three hands actually. Maria Luna, followed by Nobles Crawford, and then we will go to our non-committee members, Sean, and then Joanna. Maria. Mute, Maria. Mute. You're on mute, Maria.
Can you hear me now?
I hear you. Yes.
Okay. Now I'm a little concerned about talking about cutting from here, moving from there when we don't.
Uh-oh, you're muted again. There we go.
Okay. I'm sorry. I'm a little concerned about suggesting cutting or moving funds from one area to another when we don't have people sitting on the table to do that type of negotiation and making sure that the money goes to the right areas that are needed. So I think that we have to be very careful about talking, you know, without enough information as to what is a benefit from the funding, especially the police department.
Mhm.
So that's what I'm saying.
Thank you very much, Maria. Nobles Crawford.
Yeah, so just kind of refocus on the question that you posed to us, Curtis. Should we be treating these as two separate resolutions? I believe that we do. And this particular conversation is the reason why. I do think that both of these resolutions, repeal of 50A and ways to reallocate the NYPD budget, require a very specific view on them, especially in the case of the budget. Now, when it comes to the budget, and just give me about a minute to say this piece of it, I can definitely understand from folks how, the phrase defund NYPD or anything like that, like abolish ICE and stuff like that, can certainly be very polarizing. And it also seems like an absolute. It's not an absolute. When we say things like defund the NYPD, it's exactly what Curtis said. There's better uses for the money than the hyper militarization of our police, for instance. And that's why when it comes to having a specific resolution for reallocation of the budget, and really on all of this, and thank you, Solomon, for posting that link, all of this falls underneath the umbrella of budget justice in NYC. Where is the money going to help our safety net services and our civil services first, right? It's all budget justice. So yes, we need to be very strategic about what it is we put our support behind as a community board when it comes to where this money is reallocated. And so that will definitely require a conversation. But I also don't think it's not something we shouldn't take up. It's very important. So I just wanted to say that first. And if anyone has a better marketing line than the two words of defund NYPD, I am 100% all ears because that's what it's going to take.
And and Maria, I just want to add, earlier, we had all of our elected officials on prior to you joining, and Councilmember Mark Levine did speak about his efforts to reallocate funding to other community-based programs and not to spend so much. So there was someone speaking about the issue who has attacked it from a budgetary legislative perspective. So we're going to move over to Sean, followed by Joanna. Sean, you're muted.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Sean. Thank you, Curtis, for your leadership. Again, for inviting me to tonight's Public Safety Committee meeting. I'd like to just say that to pretty much follow what Nobles was saying, which was remarkable, in my opinion, that we spend more money on policing than on mental health services, affordable housing, and youth programming combined, right? So I think that when we're talking about defunding, I can see how that can be a scary word for many, but keep in mind that if we're just saying reduce the NYPD's budget by $1 million through 4 years, that is not eliminating the NYPD. It's in fact, we're simply restoring them to where they operated to 2013 and 2014. And it would also provide a lot of benefits for our youth, which I think is very, very important. And so it's really not as radical as people say. It's just that we have to reflect a budget that represents justice and that represents the interest and needs of our youth and our students. Thank you.
Thank you. Joanna. Followed by our Assistant Chair, Danielle. Joanna Garcia.
Hi.
Mm-hmm.
When we're looking at being very surgical in defunding NYPD, and again, defund NYPD is basically a hashtag to get people's attention and look a little closer at the inequities of how the city prioritizes who it's going to budget and what agency is going to get what support. I want to make sure that we're cognizant, and maybe the resolution can speak to equity and how those cuts would happen, because the reality is that there has been an increase over the last 4 or 5 years in the NYPD budget, and we want to ensure that when there is a cut, that they're not cutting the Black and brown people that actually work at the lower end in regards to salary in the department. And we're talking about, for example, the traffic, the safety officers, those that help the crossing guards, The majority of them are women of color. And if the NYPD, like any other agency, is asked to take a cut, they're going to look there first. So when we ask for someone to agency to make a cut, we also have to look for justice and equity in those cuts. So I think that the resolution should speak to that.
Thank you very much, Joanna. See, Maria, I think that also kind of goes back to what you were saying. We are not budget analysts. We're not trying to analyze the budget. We're trying to make a statement on equity. So I think Joanna made a very good point of whatever the resolution ends up being. It seems like we're aiming towards two different resolutions, one on budget equity and the other on CCRB. So are there any other comments about these two issues separately? I think we've exhausted, I think we pretty much agree on CCRB. We just need a motion. And then we need to either, oh, wait a minute. Danielle, my assistant chair has a question, has a comment about budget equity.
Oh, no, not about budget equity specifically. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, not about budget equity specifically. And I feel like you've said, everybody's mostly already mentioned all of the important points that we should include in this. I think including that term specifically, though, would be great and really important, and perhaps not using language like defund NYPD, but sort of, reallocating funds and making sure that, and showing our support for like SYEP, continue to receive allocation of funds. And so I guess I would be in support of having two separate resolutions. 50A could be a standalone resolution, but perhaps we could also include some of the other pieces of legislation that were mentioned by the other elected officials tonight, and sort of have one reso that addresses a bunch of those. I mean, I don't know if people have strong feelings about 50A standing alone, but I think we could perhaps have one reso that addresses a number of those legislation items together, and then separately a reso on the reallocation of funds. If that, I'm not sure what people think about that.
And Curtis and Danielle, I have a comment. Equity.
Just, Danielle, it seems to make sense because it's there seem to be efforts to look at those kind of efforts collectively at the state level. There's a package of bills from Black and Latino caucus and at the city level as well as the state level. So it may make sense to look at some of the existing resolutions and what's happening there, and maybe lumping CCRB in with that and keeping the budget equity separate. So I agree with you on that.
I know that Carmen has a package of 10 items, which are all addressing police reform. And so I think it'd be really great to sort of have all of those things together, because I think ultimately 50A is getting at, more transparency so that there could ultimately be police reform, more accountability. And so I think they all go together, if we can put them together.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I think we are
I have one quick comment.
Okay, yes, Sally.
The other thing, both redirecting to community-based programs, but specifically with regard to people with mental illness and responding to calls for emotionally disturbed persons, we need to have the proper personnel accompanying the police to those occasions. I have a friend that was actually killed by the police. We need police. When someone with mental illness is dealing with the police, having a policeman there tends to escalate the situation. We need people there with the proper mental health training that can de-escalate. And so I think that we need to have the proper personnel, and that does not exist.
Right.
I definitely agree with echo what Sally is saying, and I think Sean and some of the elected officials mentioned that as well, the importance of redirecting funds to perhaps case manager. And there was a New York Times article about this, an opinion piece that was really great about redirecting funds to sort of social workers who could potentially respond instead of police officers. So yeah, that's a great point, Sally. Thank you.
And they need to respond together.
Yeah.
You need to have a medical person there.
Thank you, Sally. Maria Luna. Muted. Maria.
Very briefly, I won't be able to vote on this resolution. I'm being interviewed on another channel right now. I have to be on in about 2 minutes, so I'm sorry. I am not going, I'm getting my responsibilities and my priorities also in line. So
Well, thank you very much, Maria. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can't you just vote now?
We don't have a motion.
Now?
Let me,
We don't have a motion yet.
please, I don't know the two resolutions yet. I also have to make people understand that I'm also the president of the 33rd Community Council. So I have to be very careful how I vote. I have to analyze every step regarding any police matter.
Thank you, Maria. I'll be in touch. I'll send you the minutes via email, Maria. Thank you. So without, I think I did have street graffiti. I mentioned that briefly. There's that budgetary issue. I think it requires much discussion. So is there a motion on the floor for our resolutions? Any resolutions?
I make a motion for two separate resolutions. One in support of the repeal for 50A, and one in support of all of the items that Carmen De La Rosa proposed for her police reform. Also, Mark Levine mentioned a couple of items from the city about illegal chokeholds.
Could we do two separate motions? We need to have two separate motions. So there's a motion first on the. Could you tackle the first motion, which is the CCRB?
Yeah, so that would be the first motion in support of the repeal of 50A, but also.
Wait, one second. We have
that motion.
Okay, second. So there's a motion on the floor, well, not on the floor, in support of Community Board Public Safety Committee supporting a full repeal of 50A.
Second that motion.
Thank you. All committee members in favor?
Aye.
Yeah,
Aye. This is Graham. Aye.
Gabriela, aye.
Gabriela. Danielle. Curtis, aye.
Do you have quorum?
We do. Yes, Maria is not a part of our committee. Okay. Now for our general board members.
Liz Ritter, aye.
Sally Fisher, aye.
Nobles Crawford, aye.
Tanya.
Thank
you.
Aisha Ogilvy, aye.
I'm gonna say.
Great. Are there any additional board members? Oh, excuse me, Eddie Santiago.
Yes, aye.
Yusuf Kalinsky, are you still here?
Yeah, I'm abstaining on this one.
Abstaining. Okay, thank you. Right. Okay, so now we've tackled the first resolution, passed at the committee level. We have four committee members in support, and we have 6 committee members and general board members in support, and 1 abstaining board member. Now, is there a second? No. Can we move forward with the next motion? Is there a motion on the floor to create a separate resolution tackling the issue of budget equity?
Sorry, Curtis. The first resolution, my proposal earlier was to include 50A and also supporting Carmen De La Rosa's police reform package in that same first reso.
Yes. Got it.
That was my understanding when I voted in favor.
Okay. Was that clear to everybody?
Yes.
Yes. I'll make sure that's in the minutes so we understand what the vote actually was. Cool. All righty.
Can you just clarify something, Curtis? So when you're saying a resolution on budget equity and voting on that, I mean, I'd like to see how the resolution is worded. So do we ultimately approve that, or how does that work?
Well, we can discuss a few of the components of the resolution now to be included. And we can vote on those general components, and we'll draft it between now and our general body meeting. We can circulate the draft in progress if there's a motion and it's approved, a draft of the resolution prior to getting to the general body meeting. Prior to the general body meeting. that's how the process would work. It is a complex issue. It is, we would focus the language on budget equity and the things that we brought up throughout the meeting, particularly the issue of maybe even looking at what Mark Levine has already advocated for, advocating for reallocating funding to healthcare, education, housing, youth programs such as SYEP. Mark Levine also mentioned the funding cut of SYEP program. So those are things that we would include in budget equity. It would be, really looking at it as a statement of, from our board saying that we're not saying cut their budget. We're saying allocate it, reprioritize their budget.
There's a comment in the chat about restorative justice training. So we should add that. And I think I would prefer seeing something like restorative justice initiatives, because I don't know that the police are the right people for that, just like I don't like the mental health first aid training that's being done with the police. We need other alternatives.
I guess also, Joanna brought up a good point earlier about, well, what are they reallocating from? And where are those cuts going to be coming from? Because we don't want them, still buying military gear, and funding some of the things we think they should be funding, but still purchasing and doing these things that they shouldn't be doing, and then cutting, people, salaried workers. So that's a concern here, and how we address that.
So yes, there's restorative justice training in our chat box. There's balance our priorities in our chat box.
Can I say something?
Yes, Liz.
So I think it's also important to just note that a budget, whether it's an institution or an organization's budget or a government's budget, reflects the priorities and the values of the organization or the society whose budget it is, and that our recommendations would flow from that. And that way, if there's anything that, because there are so many components, healthcare, education, social work, restorative justice, summer youth employment, it runs the gamut. If we have an early whereas that talks about the moral imperative and a budget as an expression of our priorities, then anything that might be missing from the very specific language is easily added in when, for example, Community Board 12 does its annual budget exercise. So, these things are all of a piece. And I think if we try and get super specific on exact numbers of dollars from here or to there, we get way in the weeds. But if we talk about this as a document of our priorities, then it's a little bit easier to build consensus around that.
Yeah.
Really good suggestion, Liz.
And like I said, it sets us up for our September budget, process.
Exactly. And I think it's also then easier for people who may have disagreements about this or that particular thing to unite behind the concept that when we say defund the NYPD, we're not talking about disbanding it altogether and saying, fuck it, we don't need cops. No one's saying that. We're saying, as Noble suggested earlier, that we have to have some equity and fairness in how that budgetary pie is sliced.
Right. So I think those are all great points.
Motion to that effect?
You can make a motion to that. I just want to make another statement. Councilmember Levine made it very clear that he's received thousands and thousands of calls on this particular issue. And I think as he stated that, I'm like, we have a rationale. We can work with this office to get some examples of what people have been saying and to help, draft the language and maybe include some of the advocacy efforts that he's already been a part of on this particular issue. So with that being said, Liz.
I would like to propose a motion that Community Board 12, with a number of whereases talking about our budgetary priorities in general, and some of the efforts of our local elected officials, including feedback from constituents, that we support NYPD, a reduction in the NYPD budget that allows for an increase in the budgets of some of the other programming and social investments in New York City that achieve our collective goals of equity, justice, and fairness.
Second that. That's perfect.
Thank you very much.
The big bucks. Oh, wait, I'm a volunteer.
So there is a motion from Liz and it's been seconded by Nobles. All in favor, please state your preference. Committee members.
Danielle?
Are you in favor? Is that an aye or?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Okay.
I thought you were saying all in favor.
Gabriela, yes.
Gabriella, yes. Graham?
Yeah, aye. But I'd like to just add that in the whereas, if possible, the term defund NYPD, I just think is very problematic. And I think maybe we should clarify that because I think it's important that people, the way that the folks on the committee put it, makes a lot more sense. And I think that the defund is a hindrance.
Yeah, I think we all
think we
Can I
mentioned
just
it.
say something? No, I agree with Graham, which is why I disagree with Nobles. I think that whether we like it or not, and frankly, I don't, defund NYPD is going to continue to be a hashtag. So we have the opportunity in this resolution to talk about what that means and to kind of recapture that language and to say something like, whereas when people talk about defund NYPD, they're not saying disband it, they're saying spread the budgetary love so that we can pay for some of the other things that are very necessary that go hand in hand with, justice.
Yes.
I think it's a teachable moment, and I think we should grab it. I think we should also include some of the language which Danielle had recommended a year and a half ago when we were doing our budget priorities. She had some very strong language recommendations on different kinds of programming, and those are the kinds of things that we're talking about here, like social work, like restorative justice, like transitional programs for people who are coming out of incarceration, all of that.
So Liz, I think you should specify exactly when you defund one part, where is the funding going on the other end? You should specify that, because right now, the way it is right now, when you say defund NYPD, it sounds horrible.
Correct. So, and that's actually why I think that we get a little too into the weeds if we say, we're going to take $1 million from here and put $1 million there. I think that as long as we say something general, like when we say defund, we don't mean disband altogether. We mean shape a budget that funds some of these other things.
Spell out those other things.
I think
1 second. Nope. Wait 1 second. Can I jump in here? I think the goal is to acknowledge the movement that's going on, to acknowledge how people are protesting against funding the NYPD. So I think we have to use our whereas to describe or to acknowledge that there's been X number of calls made to defund NYPD during this time period, and we focus on just acknowledging it and just making it more, maybe defining what defund means. We don't have to go into, we're advocating for defunding. We have to just acknowledge it, I believe, in a whereas, and I think this will solve our issue.
And also OC, when Liz was talking about earlier with the quote unquote defund, she also qualified that with making the budget more fair according to the needs of the community. And therefore we can fill in what those details are as the conversation evolves. But I think that giving us the blanket umbrella term of to the needs of the community in terms of where that budget goes as a qualifier of quote unquote defunding NYPD, I think that gives us a catch-all.
Yes. Okay.
I just wanted to jump in here really quick and talk about when I was on youth and education, I actually brought up restorative justice as something that needed to be funded in our community. We were successful in getting it highly ranked by the board where we requested funding. So I think we should find out status of what has happened with that. To see if the city has responded in kind or if there needs to be follow-up, and then maybe include language related to that in this resolution.
Thank you very much.
So I want to jump in. I feel strongly about including, first of all, thank you, Liz, for your comments, because there was an item last year in the public that came from the Public Safety Committee about adding additional police officers, and we modified it to include or to say police training, and specifically for mental health, homelessness, and substance use. And so I think my feeling would be that to include some of those sort of general buckets and not maybe get so into the weeds, but include things like Sally mentioned, mental health, homelessness, substance use. I think also for folks who have been formerly incarcerated, since they're a huge target, especially folks who are continue to remain on parole. So that would be my 2 cents.
But again, Danielle, I just want to make sure that this is not, what I'm advocating for is not mental health training for policemen. I'm advocating for people with mental health expertise. Okay, I just
totally
got that.
Totally agree.
Good.
I was just referencing because Liz had referenced the item last year. I totally agree. I'm not referring to police training. I'm referring specifically to mental health programming.
All right. So it seems like we were. So we have yes. So we have a motion. There's a second on the floor. Danielle, you said yes. Graham have said yes. Gabby has said yes. I vote yes. Our other board members, Liz.
I vote yes.
Yeah. Sally.
I vote yes.
No votes. Tanya.
Yes.
Alicia.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
And OC.
I need to read it. I'm sorry. I just jumped in onto the meeting like 7 minutes ago. I think it's unfair to just vote right now.
Got it. We'll have you down.
And I'm just abstaining on this one.
Thank you very much. Both of our resolutions passed. I'll start drafting the language and we'll share with the committee within the next 2 weeks. These are obviously very large resolutions and they're going to be very complex. So I would love to get input along the way as I begin to draft them. Danielle, I'm sure we always work together on these, so I'll make sure that we start a shared doc and we can start to collaborate. With that being said, we have our last agenda item, which is summer schedule. You know, obviously we are in a very challenging time period. I don't expect things to calm down over the summer because it's the summer. So I would like to suggest, to the committee and whoever else wants to attend, a summer meeting of sorts in July. Maybe we can focus on a particular topic. It could be an issue forum, whatever we want it to be. But I do think we need to have a place where the community can come and share their concerns, as well as perhaps learn about another issue that we've tackled tonight. So we can do a issue forum. It can be part issue forum, part updates, whatever the committee desires. But I do feel that it's needed. Maybe we can take the month of August off. Maybe we can revisit in June, July. But I do want to suggest that we have some agreement, at least on a meeting, and we can figure out the date. So that's my recommendation. Are there any comments about that?
I agree, Yosef. Much easier doing this on Zoom over the summer, I think, also, than coming to the office. So it makes it easier for me to say yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Yes.
Graham, yes.
I just want to remind people, wearing my secretary attendance cop hat, that I think it's a great idea to have a meeting. I think it's fantastic if the maximum number of people who can participate do. Yosef is totally right that Zoom makes it easier. for anybody who can't participate, just know that that would be, the participation is optional, and it would not be considered an absence that counts against you, in case anybody's worried about that.
Okay, great. And we can talk about the agenda right now. I'm thinking maybe we can focus on a particular one issue. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of developments over the next few weeks, so we can all collectively start to monitor what's going on and decide what our topics are going to be collectively, since it'll be a little bit more laid back meeting in July. Does that sound like a plan? Okay, well, thank you all. It was a very long meeting. This is our longest public safety meeting we've had since I've been the chair. We have a lot of issues to tackle, obviously, in our community. There are a lot of things that we have to continue to discuss and hopefully resolve in our community, but I do want to acknowledge, that this is a tough challenge for all of us, particularly me as a man of color. I have had a very challenging 8 days. We've had a challenging 400 years in this country. So, it's nothing new to me, but I do feel the importance of acknowledging that history, our shared history, and we're going to all, try to do our best to make a difference. We're not perfect. We're never going to be perfect. And that's all I have to say. So thank you all. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
I think Nobles' daughter is going to second that motion.
You want to say second? You say second? Second?
Oh.
Sleepy.
Oh my God.
So moved. All right. You all have a great day, and thanks for joining in.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take it easy, folks.
I am so moved.